Chapter 2 of Tractate Temurah covers further laws of temple offerings. The first Mishnah says there are some unique differences between personal and communal temple offerings. Personal offerings can be substituted. Personal offerings can be male or females, while communal offerings are always males. Personal offerings must be brought even once their designated time has passed, and the owner needs to always offer the accompanying libations, while those don't apply by the communal offering, although they would need to offer the libations once the offering has already been brought. Communal offerings are unique, as they override the laws of Shabbos and the laws of impurity. Rabbi Meir actually holds that the Kohen Gadol's daily mincha and the Yom Kippur Bol Chatas are private offerings, and they override the Shabbos and impurity, so he says it's that any offering which has a fixed time overrides the Shabbos and holidays. The Gemara says, actually, personal bird offerings cannot be substituted, but our Mishnah was just discussing animal offerings, and this is like the opinion that an animal's offspring can be a replacement. Also, our Mishnah only discusses primary offerings, which is why we didn't mention the inability to substitute a substitution, which actually also answers the prior question about offspring. We said personal offerings, unlike communal offerings, can be male or female. The olah must be a male, but the bird olah can also be a female. A chatas must be a female, but the nasi's goat offering must be a male. And we don't discuss asham offerings, as there are no communal asham variants. Or it's just that the Mishnah is saying that there is such thing as a personal offering that could be offered as a male or a female, which would be the shlamim offering. We said by the personal offering, if the designated time passes, the owner needs to replace it. We source this and the remaining principles. A source seems to say that the libations can be offered at night, which isn't true, so it explains it refers to libations that are brought by themselves, which can be brought by night, not libations brought with offerings. On the topic of libations, some show how they're juxtaposed in a verse to the shlamim offering, which teaches that both must be brought by day, as mentioned. That's described further. Some relevant verses on this are discussed. New Mishnah. A private chatas whose owner instead was atoned through a different offering, the chatas must be left to die. A communal chatas whose owner was instead atoned through a different offering, it's a dispute if it's left to die. It quotes a support for the opinion which says it's not, as this, the laws of substitution, and others are only done by personal offerings. The Gemara quotes the source for the fact that once a second animal is offered, the original designated animal is not offered. Some say it should be left to graze, others say it must be left to die. Those that say it must be left to graze is where it was lost and found before the replacement was offered, or it's that both opinions are where the original chatas was lost and found before the replacement was offered, and they just hold differing opinions. This source is the differing opinion that says a communal chatas whose owners were atoned is actually left to die, along with some related discussions. It also speaks on the greatness of a number of particular sages throughout history, and that as time went on, our knowledge has declined and been forgotten, and that our leaders from a certain point onwards all have had their own sort of flaws. Many laws were even forgotten after Moshe's passing. It said 3,000 laws were forgotten in his period of mourning, and it was asked of Joshua and Samuel to teach new things, but they said after Moshe, the Torah cannot be changed and no new laws can be introduced. It said one of these forgotten laws was on the status of a chatas whose owner died, as to what the status is in such a case, which is relevant as that's one of the things we're discussing here. It said that when Moshe left to enter the Garden of Eden, he told Joshua to ask him any uncertainties he had on the Torah, and Joshua said essentially that he knew everything, so Moshe was very upset due to his students' apparent lack of humility, and hundreds of laws were then forgotten by Joshua, and everybody became upset, so they had to then go to a war. Although it is said that through the analysis of many sages, a lot of these old laws have been restored. It expounded a number of related verses, speaking on the greatness of figures like Kalev, Othniel, or Yabitz, and many others, and it teaches that if somebody dedicates himself to Torah study, God will grant his requests. It expounds further on the proof that a communal offering where the owners were atoned through a different animal, the animal is not left to die. That's discussed. New Mishnah. There's this stringency of consecrated animals over substituted animals, as a consecrated animal can become substituted, that a community and partner can together consecrate an animal, and an animal fetus or individual limb can be consecrated. All of these do not apply by animal substitutions. There are some stringencies of offering substitutions over consecrated animals. A substituted animal can become sanctified even if it's permanently blemished, and it cannot become deconsecrated to be sheared or worked with. Also, according to some, an unintentional act is considered like an intentional act by an offering substitution. There is no difference between a substituted and a consecrated animal in that a mixed breed or a defected animal or an animal born via C-section and a tumtum and androgynous cannot become sanctified, and they cannot sanctify others by substitution. The Gemara says, when it's said by animal substitutions that an unintentional act is like an intentional one, the case here is that the man thought that it is permitted to substitute an offering, or he thought it was permitted to consecrate a blemished animal for the altar. So this would be valid by the substitution, and there would be lashes, but not to like the consecration. Alternatively, it just means that if somebody meant to substitute the animal and accidentally said it's substituted as a shlomim, if he did this substitution, it's valid and there's lashes. If he did this with a blemished animal by sanctification, there's no lashes. Alternatively, the case is that somebody said that this animal should lose its sanctity and this one should gain it, not realizing that that's a prohibited act of substitution. So again, lashes. And if the equivalent of this was done by consecrating a blemished animal, nothing happens. Last alternative, somebody entered a house planning on substituting or consecrating an animal unknowingly, and then accidentally did this unknowingly. There'd be lashes for the substitution and nothing for the ineffective consecration. By a mixed breed, a defect, a C-section, or an otherwise animal, it is said that it cannot become sanctified through substitution, and they cannot substitute for others. This is explained as they can attain their initial sanctity by being the offspring of consecrated animals, but they cannot then go and produce a substitution. This is as this opinion likens these variants to non-kosher animals, so the same principles between these would apply. A blemished animal can be substituted, as it's not like a non-kosher animal, as its type is permitted for consumption. Related, it said if somebody consecrated an animal with a defect, some say it does create physical sanctity and must be then left to die, while others say it's the equivalent of trying to consecrate a rock. So it only attains monetary sanctity and can be redeemed. It quotes cases to dispute between these opinions. And that's the end of chapter 2.